All right, let's get started. So, welcome everyone. My name is Ria Nab. I am the Placemaking Community Associate for the Urban Design Center, and the work I do is centered around this grant. And so I'm very happy to share a little bit more about it. So, this is the Placemaking Application Guidebook. You can find it on our website and on the application itself for the grant. So to find it, you're going to open up the grant application, and this first line here has the application guidebook. It's a really helpful tool to figure out what you need to have before you fill out the application, and it'll also help you develop your idea in a way that's very strong and makes your application stand out. So I'm going to scroll through it fairly quickly, but I wanted to go over the application process a little bit. So one of the requirements is your group needs to be primarily from Charlotte and the project needs to be in Charlotte. This is a Charlotte sort of metro area. It doesn't have to be in uptown per se. We have a limit or a minimum requirement of 3 people on your team. So make sure you talk to your community members and get people engaged. And then developing an idea is part of it, documenting the site. And this can be, with your iPhone. It doesn't need to be very fancy. You don't need an architect to survey your land or anything. And then getting letters of support. So engaging with your HOAs or community organizations to get a letter of support from them. This can be in the form of an email. This can be a Word document. Just something that shows that you've engaged your community leaders and they know about the project. And then community engagement plan, we do require that you talk to your neighbors and get feedback from them. So for example, if you wanted to do a mural, this can look like your artist doing a community meeting where they show their design concept and the community gives feedback. It can look like surveys from events and stuff. So it can sort of look like a lot of different things, but the idea is to get feedback from the community and make sure that your community has a voice during this project. And then we ask for a preliminary design. So this can be your Pinterest board. If you don't have any drawing technical skills, you can send me some inspo images of what you're imagining this project would look like, or you can, yeah, get your pen and paper out and draw us a little sketch. Cost estimate, this is a little important because we want to make sure that you understand how much a project's going to cost and the breakdown of where the grant funds are going towards. So items over $1,000, we want to see, a screenshot from the Lowe's website showing how much it costs so that we know that you're thinking about, where is this money going and what you can accomplish with $25,000, let's say. And then the maintenance and programming plan, if your project has, again, let's say a mural, you know, talking about how, are you going to touch it up over the next 10 years? Or like, is the artist in their fee including some sort of maintenance preservation plan? If there's a community garden, are you checking it weekly to make sure the plants are watered? Things like that to make sure that these projects last longer than, your 1 year working on them. And then check your application, make sure that you are submitting all of the necessary requirements. This guide also goes through how you can develop your idea. So picking a good location is definitely part of it. Thinking about, what your community needs, who lives there, what amenities you already have or might need. Those are all things that placemaking can solve. These are the range of projects that we have funded in the past. And, if you've got an idea that doesn't quite fit this box, but want to explore it, we're open to new ideas all the time. And then the technical assistance. I do get this questions about this a lot. So this is if you have big ideas but no idea where to start, or you know that you have this great idea but you're not as in touch with the community and want to get their feedback. So the Urban Design Center can do a technical assistance grant where we will host a community meeting and workshop with the neighbors to develop some ideas for what the community needs in terms of placemaking projects, and we'll sort of advise which ones to pursue and how to go about pursuing them. And then we give you about $5,000 as like a sort of starting fund. So say your community decides they want to do a community garden, you can take that 5,000 and start building that community garden at the end of the year. This checklist is super helpful, so make sure that you follow it. Some of it is like, for example, the project description. That is a written response within the application itself. Um, but it would be really helpful to put all of this information in a Word document. So that way, if while you're filling the application, something crashes or it doesn't submit right, you have a, living document that keeps all your work safe so you just can copy and paste it in. Highly recommend that. And then the rest of the document tells you how to get a lot of these materials. So letters of support, we've got a community organization contact list. If you need help finding your community leader because they're not on this list, definitely reach out. We can try to help you find who you need to talk to. If you have a project that's on the city right of way or a city parcel, you do not need a letter of support right now. We can help you get that letter of support after you get awarded. But if it's private property, you want to make sure that the property owner has signed off in a letter of agreement saying, yes, you can build your community garden on this property. Um, North Carolina right of way. So this is like Independence Boulevard or any of the highways. You don't necessarily need permission right now, but we will work with you to get that permission. It is about a year-long process, so you have to have a little more patience with this one, but those projects are quite valuable and definitely worth it. Mecklenburg County projects, so any of the park systems in Charlotte are owned by the county. And so you would need to reach out to Parks and Rec to get permission to do something within those parks. And if you don't know, you can check out Charlotte Explorer or Polaris, and those are really great resources to figure out like who owns the property, who maintains the road, things like that. And then this is guidance on cost estimates. So we've got an example budget, some standard costs right now. So for a painted crosswalk, for example, you want to budget about $30 to $50 per square foot, and you can build out your things. These are examples of what a cost estimate would look like for over $1,000. So you can get like a professional invoice depending on if you're trying to get a service from an artist or CMPD, for example, or you can do a screenshot from the website of showing how much it costs. And then we've got our scoring criteria. Deadline is May 1st for the applications at 5 p.m. So make sure that you get started as soon as possible. And if you do get awarded, we have a startup workshop on June 22nd. So make sure that you are available that day or somebody on your team is available that day because we do a lot of important setup work for your grant on that day. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to you all for questions. So you can either drop in the chat, you can raise your hand, and I can call on people, or you can just unmute yourself, however you'd like. Any questions? Yeah, Jeet? Is that how you say it?
Yes, yes. So I have this one intersection in mind in my neighborhood that
Mm-hmm.
I have been requesting crosswalks for. It has all way like four-way stop signs, and I've
Mm-hmm.
requested multiple 311 requests for having crosswalk, and they say it doesn't qualify because it has four-way stops and this intersection is low priority on crosswalks,
Mm-hmm.
which I do not understand the logic behind. It's right outside a park that kids access, and there's no way a safe crosswalk to access the park. So, will will a placemaking grant be helpful in this scenario? Because I've tried 311 for last 4 years and I'm not able to get the crosswalk there. Can I apply a placemaking grant to finally make that happen, but maybe a mural or something instead of a regular
Mm-hmm.
black and white crosswalk?
Yeah, so actually, this photo on my screen right now, this is a painted mural on a street that a lot of the neighbors use to go to the grocery store, I believe. And it's not an official crosswalk, but it does increase visibility for those pedestrians, and it sort of makes the cars slow down because they try to avoid the paint and
Right.
everything. So this is a really great example of how we can sort of work around, what a way to make it safer to cross the street. We have worked with CDOT before to install crosswalks as well. We have another grant project this year actually that's doing that. So there is definitely possibility to address that issue with the placemaking grant.
Wow. Okay. So just a follow up then, the reason that it got denied through 311 because it was low priority, would that factor in when I apply for this grant, or this would be separate than that?
We would work with, if awarded, we would work with CDOT to figure out why.
Hello?
Um, and we would help you sort of navigate, is it going to be just a mural or are we going to put striping for a crosswalk?
Okay.
But it wouldn't hurt
Okay.
your application, no.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Mhm. Kadisha?
Hi, Raya. This is Kadisha with Five Points Community Collaborative. I just have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The first question is, are we able to sponsor multiple events with one grant?
Mhm.
And then the other question is, how do we create a receipt for nonprofits that don't necessarily have a fee schedule, but we would like to make a donation? It'll be over $1,000. Just make a donation to their organization for their time. So, for example, we're going to have JCSU at one of the events, and then there's a nonprofit Double Dutch team that we're interested in working with, and their donation would be over 1,000. How would we account for that in the submission?
Okay. So as far as I know, and I might need Charlotte to correct me on this one, but I don't believe you can use grant funds for a donation. You can use it to pay for services, but you cannot use it to donate. Um,
So it would be for their services. So if the band performs, they're providing a service, and then the Double Dutch team is going to be putting on an act. So it would be
mhm.
for their services, but
So
they don't
then,
necessarily have a fee schedule for that.
um,
Um, we can
yeah.
send you an invoice template, and you could have those organizations invoice you all for their time or whatever service they're providing, and it's, more of a an informal invoice than them needing to get a bunch of accounting software. But that way there's still
Okay.
a paper trail.
Hmm.
Okay, awesome. All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And
And then to answer the
then,
first
yeah.
question,
Mhm.
yes, we prefer to be funding multiple events, especially in our like city-owned public spaces. So Five Points Plaza is a really great example of this. We don't typically fund singular events, at least not
Okay.
since I've worked here. We typically like to see like a seasonal activation of the site. So a series of events is totally within the grant scope.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Good afternoon. I have maybe two questions, but just to
Mhm.
start with the first one. If there are two parcels of land within a subdivision or neighborhood, but one parcel is owned by the HOA and the other parcel is city owned,
Mhm.
and let's say that we have two different committees, is it okay for us to apply for both? Or because they're
So
separate parcels but owned by different entities?
So you can apply as one project if it is going to sort of span both, and you would just need permission from the HOA, and then we can work with the city to get permission from the city. So that's one way to do it is just have it be one application. If the project is so big that you need, 25,000 for one side and the 25,000 for the other side, it might make sense to break that up. You can either apply in phases, so you can do, you know, so and so
Mhm.
project phase one with the 25,000, and then you can come back next year and apply again, or you can try to apply as two separate projects if they are completely different
Hmm. Okay.
things.
Yeah,
So you can explore those options for sure.
that makes sense. Thank you for that. And then on Polaris, I do not see, like for example, if I don't see owner data, we believe it's owned by the city, but I don't exactly see it when I try to double check for it.
Okay.
And it does not show up in the Charlotte Explorer website. Do you have any other guidance on how we can just get sure on who owns
Mhm.
that other parcel?
If you want to drop that address in the chat, I can do a little Googling during this meeting.
Okay. It's like a, I'm not gonna call it a common area, but it's like at the end of our subdivision and it's like a pedestrian bridge, a sidewalk. So it doesn't really have an address, but I can give you the coordinates.
Yeah, or if you wanted to do like a screenshot of Google Maps and shoot it to our email, then we can
Mhm.
email you back with some
Okay,
Mhm.
information.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah. And then all of our emails, I believe mine's in this document, but it's just our first name dot our last name at, yeah, here it is, at charlottenc.gov.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Julia?
Yes, I am wondering for the part where we need to identify the exact location.
Hmm.
We're still working with a couple of different national landlords that have multiple properties in Charlotte to
Mm-hmm.
identify a location that works for them to like they have to go through their their own business um, considerations. Would we be able to, like, for photos of the space, be able to just show like a typical space that we'd be looking to and then finalize the location after? So I guess like a high level of what we're doing is we're going to be working in partnership with Zero Empty Spaces to activate vacant storefronts or
Okay.
commercial spaces with active working artist studios.
Okay.
Um, so it's we don't have a location narrowed down yet, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I think it's a good placeholder, and I think that's going to come up to the committee to decide whether or not. The biggest concern would be if you can't find a space, then what do you do with the grant money?
Hmm.
Because this is, city funds, and we are supposed to be good stewards of the people's money.
Absolutely.
Um, promising something that doesn't have a place to go would be tricky.
Okay.
So I would at least secure one location and maybe
If
come up with some alternative ways to use your funds if you can't secure a
Sure. If
location.
we get a letter from a landlord like JLL, for example,
Hmm.
um, with sort of a letter of commitment that they will find us a space within the city of Charlotte limits, but would that suffice?
That would that would be much better.
Stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of like a chicken or the egg kind of scenario with
Mm,
working with a national landlord like that. So that's kind
yeah.
of why I'm asking. But
Yeah, no, but
that helps.
having a commitment letter would be very helpful as your letter of support.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Carolina?
Hi. Yeah, so I was curious if you could talk more about um finding a group. I'm more on the independent artist side of things. I would love to
Okay.
do a mural or work on something, but I don't have a team. And I'm relatively new to Charlotte, so I don't really have that community built in. What are my options or like what other things
Hmm.
should I be doing? Yeah.
Do you have a location for your project in mind?
I don't. I have a few ideas, but nothing super concrete.
Okay, so I would explore the ideas and pick a neighborhood at least and reach out to their HOA. That's a pretty quick and easy way to get a group going is, get the HOA signed on and then you get volunteers from them or, just the HOA president. to sign on as your teammate.
Hmm.
Um, if you've got any friends in the area, truly, they can be on your team too. Um, just like anybody who, like, especially if you're an artist, who can help you install the artwork or, help field the emails between you and the city, things like that. But I think I would recommend starting with picking an area and reaching out to their community organization to build those connections because you're going to need their letter of support anyway. So getting them to just join your team would be ideal.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Another great resource for artists is Charlotte is Creative. They can connect you with a lot of local artists as well. So that's another way to sort of build your community.
And I dropped the neighborhood organization contact list in the chat. This is a database that the city manages so that staff know and you all know kind of the point of contact for these different neighborhood organizations. So once you do have an area in mind, you'll likely be able to get a hold of someone by utilizing that list.
Morgan, do you have your hand up?
Yeah,
What's up?
so I was curious about kind of like how beholden are we to our budget, like for specific line items? Like we don't yet have our like really specific line items picked out for like playground
Mhm.
equipment and things like that or equipment. So like does it, if we decide to sub out, a picnic bench for a regular bench or something, like is that something
Mhm.
that's a problem, or how much flexibility, I guess, is there?
We can be pretty flexible. The the biggest difference would be if you are trying to get your grant funds before you purchase these items, we need to know exactly what you're buying, and you
Okay,
have to stick to that. If you
sure.
are looking to get reimbursed, like you already like after you get your grant, because you can't purchase before you sign your grant agreement. But after you get the grant, if you go ahead and purchase those things and send us an invoice, that's a lot more flexible. The idea is just, being able to, again, like Charlotte said, paper trails, being able to keep track of where the money went and what it was used for, is totally fine, as long as we can keep track of it. And as you can see with some of these, like their price ranges.
Okay.
So a lot of this is going to be estimates because in this economy, everything changes prices on the weekly. So we understand that and we can be flexible with what you eventually pick.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Mary?
Hey, yes. I was wondering if the landowner is part of the project team, can
Mhm.
they write the letter of approval of the project?
If it's like a private property,
Yes.
yeah, so they can still write their own letter of support since it's their property.
Okay, that makes sense. And then we have a gardener on our team, and our plan was to pay them for, their part in the project.
Mhm.
Do we need to not have the gardener on the team so that we can pay them as a contractor, or could they stay a part of the team of three?
They can be on the team, they just can't be like the team lead or our associated vendor, if that makes sense. So when we pay
Mhm.
grants, it's going to go to one person, which is typically the team lead, and that's sometimes an HOA. And the idea is that that's not just going directly into their bank account, it's going to the grant stuff. So as long as the gardener is not the grant lead or the um, receiver of grant funds, they can be contracted, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Can the property owner act as team lead?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
So people on the team can get paid just as long as they're not team lead.
Hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I just want to add a little clarity to that. It would be people on the project team would be paid for their specific service, not for being members of the project team. So any type of, administration that comes with the grant or like general project management, um, that's kind of you all donating your time. But with this landscaper example, they obviously bring a specific skill set to the table, that would be contracted for.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, for clarifying that. Marche?
Yes, I have another question. Are there any restrictions on vendors' use? I understand that we can't just be giving out donations, which makes sense. But when it
Mhm.
comes to whether it's sourcing play equipment or seating or this or that, are there any restrictions on what vendors are used? Or do you want us to use like minority businesses, or are there any kind of things like that?
To my knowledge, no, there's not. You can't use the grant funds for certain things, like you can't use it on alcoholic beverages. Like Charlotte said, you can't pay yourself to do grant work, like the admin and sort of planning part of it.
Mhm.
Um, but as and I guess JT or James, let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't think there are any vendor restrictions, right?
No, no, none that we can think of because the city, we won't be paying the vendors you're working with, will
Mhm.
be reimbursing and dispersing that money out to y'all.
Got
So, you know, whoever you find that gives you the deal that you're happiest with and gets the work done.
it. Okay,
Mm.
thank you.
Yeah, because we had, amateur artists get signed on to do the grant work sometimes, or, you know, smaller businesses. So that's totally fine for you guys to figure out how to pay them is between you guys.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I work on some government contracts, so sometimes I know there's that like
Mm-hmm.
side. So I didn't know if that was a thing here.
No, not for this grant. We're a little too small for that.
Okay, thanks, guys.
G.
Yes, I do have a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I live in a neighborhood where the streets are not pedestrian friendly, like the intersections. There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot. So I at least have a couple in my mind. Is it okay for one to submit more than one project for grant? And if that is the case, how do you guys determine which ones to approve, which ones to deny, or is
Mm-hmm.
that any implications to submitting more than one project at a time, or should I wait one for each year or something?
So you can apply for multiple projects if they're different. I would say for street murals, we have in the past done um, funding for like a series of street murals that, went up and down Tryon, I believe. Um, so like Art Walks, I believe did like a North Tryon expansion project so that they could have more tours on that corridor. And they had like four different murals that were funded within that one grant project. So you can do multiple murals within one project if you wanted to.
And it could be on different streets. It may not be like one continuous street, but like as I said, I live in a
Yeah.
neighborhood where the streets all across are not that safe to walk.
So like this project that we were just talking about earlier too, they did these, like as you can see, it's a lot of separate murals, but then all up into the neighborhood, she did a lot of mini murals to make it like a
Hmm.
I Spy project for kids to like get excited about walking around outside. Um, I think she also did sculpture as well within this project, and it's all throughout the neighborhood. So it's
Oh,
okay to space them out. I would say keep it within one neighborhood so that you don't have
uh-huh,
to get too many permissions.
uh-huh.
But yeah, just keep in mind project budget and how many you can get within one project.
Yeah, and I would also recommend in your budget, itemizing each one of the mural locations separately. Because sometimes when
Uh-huh.
we're down to the wire making some of these final funding decisions, we might have enough money to, fund one of the locations if you submitted three. So it'd be really helpful to
Mhm.
know what the breakdown is for each of them.
That's a good point.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Also, this document you're sharing, is this on the web page for the grant?
Hmm. Yeah, so let's see. So you can find it from the grant application itself. I
Uh-huh.
believe it is also on, let's see. You can find it. Yep, you can find it under how do I apply for the placemaking grant on the grant website as well.
Okay, sure. Thank you. That is helpful. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah. Mary?
Hey, it was kind of along those lines with the multiple murals and potentially one getting funded. I was
Mhm.
curious if there was a specific number of grants or a specific amount of money that was going to be funded, kind of trying to think through if there's a greater chance of getting funded by keeping the project smaller and therefore the budget lower, or if that wasn't a consideration.
We don't have a certain number of grants that we particularly pick. Like we don't say 10 per year. We typically try to pick quality over quantity in that regard. So as long as the application's strong, it can be a small budget or a large budget. It just has to be within that 25,000. Um, so it I think I would recommend doing what Charlotte said, where if it is a bigger project, showing the cost breakdown so that way we can at least partially fund it if we have, a couple extra thousand that can't we need some place to put it towards. I think that's a really great strategy is showing us like, the full project, but then also the itemized budget so that we can at least partially fund where we can.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm. Kelsey?
Hi, I have applied for this previously for a mural project. So I
Hmm.
was just wondering if you could give any kind of like tips, best practices for mural applications. And this would be a mural on the outside of a building uptown.
When it comes to artwork, having concept sketches is always really great, especially like seeing it 2D and then also on the wall. Um, being realistic with your artwork is also very important. So, if you're doing a ground mural, you are not going to be able to get a high level of detail. It's going to be more color blocking. Whereas on a wall, you can get as detailed as you want because you can actually get up there and, paint. So that's definitely something that we do consider is like feasibility of, what you want to do. Showing your portfolio is always very, very helpful and very important, I would say, because then we get a better sense of your aesthetic, what you have been able to do, what you have accomplished, so that, if you've got a series of wall murals throughout Charlotte, we can be like, oh, yeah, we know this, they can do this and within the timeline and all that kind of stuff. So showing your portfolio and making it relate to what you want to do. So say you've never done a flower mural, but you've done like flower paintings, put that in your portfolio. Show us that, you can transfer your skills to a wall surface is always very helpful as well.
Yeah, I think too, visibility when it comes to murals,
Mm,
one's rate a lot higher, if they're gonna have a high level of visibility.
yeah, so like picking a good location, a good wall that the public can see and that would impact, where you're walking. If there's, a ton of murals in the area, we might not score that one as highly just because there's not as much of a need versus, a wall in a space that kind of feels a little iffy to brighten it up and make it feel better and more safe. Those are all very good points. So yeah, visibility, like being able to see the wall by the public on a sidewalk is helpful. That all make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Marsha?
Yes, me again. Question about the project team.
Mm-hmm.
The three people you start with, does everyone have to stay on, or if someone drops out, do you replace them? So I know this is going to take some time over the course of a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had situations where, somebody had to move for work or, you know, for personal reasons, they had to step away from the project, and that's totally fine. The reason we have a minimum of 3 people is so that there's always somebody to contact.
Mhm.
So, say you are really busy with your personal life, I have 2 other people that I can reach out to and bother so that, we can keep the project going and keep um, the momentum going. So, I would definitely recommend if somebody has to step out that you have backup or you replace your teammate soon. So that way there's just multiple contacts and just support to get the project done.
For sure. Is an individual allowed to be on multiple project teams? So say, for example, in my neighborhood, we're considering these two different applications. I'm
Hmm.
on the HOA board as well. And the HOA is going to have a hand in, for sure, the one that's on our property. So
Yeah.
likewise, probably going to also have a say in the other one too, because they need to kind of go together in a sense. Can an individual be on both project teams?
Yes, but I would say I would not recommend them being the lead on both project teams.
Okay.
I would
Yeah, I'm like the
recommend
fourth
having,
person on the initial team, so I'm like the fourth leg. There's
yeah,
four of us. Okay, but I
that's
would be the
fine.
lead on the second one.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Um, Hi. I just had a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So I was wondering, could this grant be used towards bringing like recycling bins and possibly a dumpster to a neighborhood? Our neighborhood, we don't have recycling available, and
Hmm.
so I was trying to see if this grant could possibly work for that, or I guess if you had an idea of how it could be used towards recycling or anything like that. I guess beautification maybe.
Yeah, so that one's tricky and I might need to lean on Charlotte a little bit for this one. But I think the hardest part of that application is going to be showing the longevity of it because, recycling and trash you need to pay for people to pick them up constantly throughout
Right.
the year.
Yeah.
So the sort of longevity of the project might be harder to score. Charlotte, have we ever funded projects like that before?
Um, we funded like a dog waste pickup station as a portion of like creating a public space. But we haven't done purely bringing in trash or recycling to a place that doesn't currently have it.
Mm.
I
I
think,
think it's worth applying. I would try to figure out, what other beautification methods can be incorporated so it becomes more about placemaking.
Yeah.
So how does it engage the community? How does, maybe like for the dumpster um, shelter, if that's people put fences around it, like can you get an artist to paint the shelter? I don't know, try to think of ways to bring it back to placemaking would be, I think, important.
Okay.
and Jackie Claire, who manages our neighborhood matching grant program, also just put in the chat the link to that program and said it would be a good neighborhood matching grant project.
Thank you, Jackie. I think Jackie's right. It is probably a better fit for the neighborhood matching grant.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate the information.
Of course. Also, hi, Jackie. Thank you for being here. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Well, I'll stay online for another 5 minutes, let's say. And if you guys have questions answered, you're welcome to hop off. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I will follow up with an email, summarize all of the questions I answered and some of the more frequently asked questions to make sure everyone has what they need. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions while you're filling out the application or if you have any issues. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest.